No, I don't think any of us are. We can welcome in now Adam LaRue. What's up, buddy? Way to join the show.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was a fun little time, I guess. Yeah, the internet's been cutting out on me. I finished up my workout and was like, all right, let me hop on the pod. And then nope, not up. But hey, made it in. Get to talk some football. Let's go.
Let's do it. Chris, why don't we move on to the next section and get Adam kicked off here?
All right. So now we finished our grievances. Dan, it's time for us to talk about some of the things that brought us gratification, that brought that shit-eating grins off our faces. We roll over, we have a cigarette, you feel so good about it. So what's some of the things that really make you feel good about last season?
What makes me feel good about last season?
Like, what's something that really stands out to you that you feel satisfied? Like, you know what? I found gratification in something from last season. Oh,
I got a great one for you. And I'm writing an article actually about this, and I'm going to be pissing off all of New York, especially Giants fans. Felt very, very validated in Daniel Jones. And look, I'm not talking about the ACL injury. Obviously, we're not wishing injury on anybody. And I wasn't anticipating nor calling for him to get injured as part of my analysis as to why I thought he was going to disappoint, both from a fantasy standpoint and from a guy who got signed $40 million for absolutely no reason. Let's take the first look at the first 5 weeks, shall we? His 17-game, or in other words, a full season pace over his first 5 weeks when the guy was still healthy would have been 7 passing touchdowns and 20 interceptions. Oh, and just 3,000 yards too, by the way. I mean, just awful stuff. Now, is it a bad offensive line? Yeah, one of the worst in football. Did he have weapons? No, not necessarily. But you knew that what you were signing up for when you were Daniel Jones in the freaking first place. And all of a sudden, we've seen now, it's not just because of the injury. The Giants have shown that they have buyer's remorse when it comes to Daniel Jones. Hence, how much they tried to give up to the New England Patriots to go ahead and get Drake May. Now, why they wouldn't just take what Denver did, take one of the quarterbacks that felt to was available, a la a Michael Penix or something like that. I don't know. That's an organizational thing. But I felt very gratified after having to listen to how Daniel Jones, who only threw 15 passing touchdowns the year before, somehow deserved $40 million, and to see him get off to that start proved otherwise. And now the Giants are just begging for the season to be over so they can finally move on from their quarterback position. So maybe a little negatory, but I felt very satisfied with the results.
Yeah, anybody who makes Tommy DeVito look like a quarterback that's better, like somehow that you have to be shamed. Like, I'm sorry, absolutely right, Dan. And when Tyrod Taylor played the offense for them, all the weapons, all the things that were wrong with that offense, Tyrod actually looked pretty good. So Daniel Jones, yeah, PU. Adam, let's get to you. What's from last season something that you just find satisfying or gratification in?
Yeah, last season was a fantastic time to be a Lamar Jackson truther. I know he got his MVP kind of in just a down year for offense and the position in general. Like, I get it. It wasn't like a super competitive MVP race, but a lot of people were being very down on Lamar Jackson. Just like, the sophomore MVP was a fluke. He's not one of the elite guys in the position. And when a lot of guys weren't necessarily like winning their team games, he was a driving force. He was a big part of the identity of the Ravens offense. And obviously their defense was really good as well. One of the best in the league. And that was a big part of them being a successful team. But he's an identity driver for that offense. He was very fun to watch last season. And did it in, I think, unique ways. Obviously he was using his legs, but it wasn't like, the crazy gashes that we've kind of seen in the past either. It was some passing, some running, kind of a mix. I was really happy with it to see him get another MVP.
So it was good he didn't convert to receiver. I'm taking it, Adam, in your opinion.
I appreciate Bill Polian for a lot of things, but his quarterback opinions past, say, 2010 aren't really something I care too much about.
I always forget that goes back to Bill Polian for some reason. I forget.
I can't.
I know you can't. As a Colts fan, you cannot. But I always forget about that. It's crazy.
It brings a grin to my face, and I find gratification. And this is something that all three of us can share, I think, and that we told you about C.J. Stroud over and over and over again. And we told you about Bryce Young over and over and over again. And surprise, look how it unfolded. We listened to so much about CJ Stroud. The Ohio State offense, he's got all his weapons. What's he going to do? That guy took Nico Collins and made Nico Collins one of the best fantasy guys you could have on your roster right now. Nico Collins, who we were just like, who's Nico Collins? Who cares? Tank Dell, I think, is a fantastic player, but hit the ground running like he was a Deshaun Jackson out there last year. We watched Noah Brown have a 200-yard games almost. So when we talk about a guy who maybe the athleticism is not such a problem. Maybe playing from the pocket isn't something that we have to get knocked against all the time. Maybe these things that you guys do when you try to test how someone reads a defense is where they have the ability or capacity to play football and process things. Maybe it doesn't mean crap. Because I know CJ Stroud went out there and balled, and I listened all off season about how Bryce Young was so great and he did nothing. While CJ Stroud took a Houston Texan team that nobody's picking to go anywhere and made him somebody relevant.
Yeah, I just want to add to that real quick, too. Just from a fantasy standpoint, 100% with you on that one. We were both on CJ. I think all three of us actually were on CJ Stroud last year over Bryce Young, and he did incredible things, especially for a rookie. But I want to slide this in here because I was having this conversation with somebody else before. CJ Stroud being drafted as a top 5 quarterback right now is a little nutty. It is hard for pocket passers, generally speaking, to get into the top 5 unless you're going to throw about 34, 33 passing touchdowns at minimum. Now, and I want to point out that he still only threw 22 as a rookie last year. Last year was the worst scoring out of the top 10 quarterbacks as a whole we've seen since 2017. And that's why you saw some of these guys like the CJ Strouds, like the Brock Purdy's, the guys who necessarily weren't putting up high prolific numbers, but were better than most last season as pocket passers sneak into the top 10 last year. I don't want people to think that's going to repeat this season. This comes into play with CJ Stroud, comes into play with guys like Jordan Love. So I just want to point that out there that unless we think CJ Stroud, and he might with the weapons that he has, I'm not saying it's impossible, but unless he's going to go out there and drop 34, 35 passing touchdowns, there is a very low probability he's going to come back and return quarterback 5 overall talent. So I just want to point that out there as we start to get into draft season. But yeah, we were 100% on CJ Stroud last year.
I will give him, Dan, Stephon Diggs is a hell of an upgrade from Noah Brown.
Yeah, no, like I said, he does have the weapons. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would be at his ceiling. That's all I'm pointing out there. Go ahead.
All right, so we're going to move, on to something else that brought us some joy. What was some things that brought you joy from the free agency trades or, just transactions that kind of happened during that time frame?
So the free agency trades for me, Derrick Henry, I don't know if there was a player this entire free agency that fell into a more perfect fit than Derrick Henry. I mean, I feel like we will go back to like the 2019, 2018 days where we thought to ourselves, what if Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson played on the same team? Like that was like a fantasy of a fantasy. And I know Derrick Henry's a little bit older, but now we finally get to see it. And just because he's a little bit older does not mean he can't still be a similar like Derrick Henry. His efficiency did not fall off a cliff. He still had 4.2 yards to carry last year, 4.5 yards per touch. He still had a broken tackle per 12 carries last season. That was still one of the best in the NFL as far as the running back situation is concerned. He's still a tank. Lamar Jackson, the great thing about him as a scrambling quarterback is that he doesn't take away touchdowns from the running back position. He doesn't usually run for a ton of touchdowns. We saw Gus Edwards go for 13 touchdowns last year. And this year, Derrick Henry, unlike a Gus Edwards or what we've seen over the Ravens for the past 5 years, is not going to be sitting there splitting with anybody of note in that backfield, especially in those money situations. So Derrick Henry, I think, has a real chance, and I have him ranked right now as my RB8 overall because of the fit that he put himself into. And right now, ADP, he's going like back in second round, early third round. He's much more valuable than that, and this was the perfect situation in this free agency. So Derrick Henry, Baltimore Ravens, that was definitely mine.
Like it. Adam, how about you?
I mean, let's talk about another running back. And Dan, this kind of in multiple ways goes back to what you've said. Saquon Barkley getting off the Giants was awesome. because we talked about Derrick Henry. I have Jonathan Taylor. There's only a handful of workhorse running backs left. It's a dying breed. They just don't come around that often. Now we have Bijan Robinson, but I mean, he's the last one to come out since like the 2017 like really great class. There was a gap where we weren't getting any like workhorse running backs. So to get one, and maybe it's kind of towards the tail end. He's been hurt quite a bit, but still looks really good when he's healthy. Like to at least get a couple years where he's not being wasted by such a bad team. I am really excited to at least just see him in somewhere that can be really relevant. It would be way cooler if Jason Kelce was the center still, but it's still going to be pretty awesome. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, thank God, no more Boston Scott. Yes, I'm excited too, Adam. Saquon Barkley to Philadelphia, hell of a move. For myself, when I look at some of those moves made, Marquise Brown brings that shit eating green smile out to my face. This picturing him in a Chiefs uniform, actually being utilized. Dan, you talked about Gabe Davis and what is that going to do for Jacksonville? And Gabe Davis having hope for maybe still could find something. Marquise Brown was a guy who's getting destined to just be pigeonholed as a one-trick pony and turn into Marquise Godwin moving forward. But instead, we're going to see him actually have a chance to show you his skill set with a Patrick Mahomes. And thank God Patrick Mahomes has a really legit speed threat, a guy who make plays, not MVS, not Justin Watson, not Cardanius Toney, who's on IR every other week, but an actual guy that can take the top off and make plays underneath. I am super excited to see Patrick Mahomes and Marquise Brown this offseason, a match made in heaven with Andy Reid as the head coach.
His target shares might get a hell of a lot greater because God knows what this Rashee Rice suspension is going to look like now. Sure. Things just seem to get worse for him in the media. Oh, my gosh. So, yeah, like that one. Good.
So we skipped over a little thing, but let's go back to coaching. What coaching hires or moves or things that happen during the coaching cycle that bring smiles or gratification to you? Start off with you, Adam.
Yeah, I'm just happy Arthur Smith is no longer the head coach of.
No, hallelujah, Dan. We didn't know hallelujah on that one. I think yes.
I
testify, Adam.
It would have been insane. It would have been insane. But you can realistically think that. All right, the record wasn't that bad, and he hasn't had a quarterback, so maybe you give him another chance. So to just finally have the nail in the coffin, get him out of there, be like, nope, we're done. It really feels like the weird stuff with the Bijan being sick thing and kind of the weird decisions he was making over the last month of the season kind of did him in. But I'm just glad that he's no longer screwing over the Falcons, and then they finally do get a quarterback, and then suddenly they have a second quarterback, and then suddenly we have all these weapons with quarterbacks. The defense was starting to play really well at the end of last season. I think this can be a fun team. And Chris, you and I were talking about it, I think the last 2 years, about how the Atlanta Falcons, they can be a fun team. They can be a fun team, but he kept ruining it. And now finally we get to see. Hopefully, I love Drake London. I know you guys do it as well. Kyle Pitts, all these guys that we've really liked.
Bijan.
Finally get unlocked. Yeah, exactly. And Kirk Cousins is playing the best football of his career before he went down. So adding that whole thing, it's going to be really fun just not having Arthur Smith there to be like, well, that's going to ruin it.
Yeah, I'll just throw mine out there, Chris, real fast, because it literally piggybacks off of Adam. Mine was Zach Robinson becoming the play caller, despite the fact that he doesn't actually have play calling experience beforehand, because the very minimum, I know he's running a 21st century offense with Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson, and that in and of itself with solid quarterback play at the bare minimum with Kirk Cousins coming off the Achilles injury. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to get more excited about. Plus, if you look around, I don't know how many coaching hires, and Chris, we'll get to yours, I guess, in a second, but I don't know how many coaching hires are really that exciting. I was shocked this past year's carousel, how many defensive-minded guys got hired. I'm sorry, from a fantasy perspective, that's not going to move my boat. It's kind of just boiled down to that default.
No, I totally understand. And real quick, Dan, can you think of a better scenario than that Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith are together? There's a more perfect fit together where I just think they're destined for each other. But I agree with you 100%.
I don't want to watch play offense this year.
I agree, but this is defensive hire, but I think where you can counter those defensive hires when you hire a good offensive mind. So I liked what Seattle did. Look, I like Pete Carroll. He's a great guy. Don't necessarily had to lose his job. But hiring McDonald and bringing Grubb in, I think, was a fantastic move. Two things that stand out to me. Number one, thank God for some fresh blood, some young guys who are fresh out of college, bring a different perspective. The NFL is full of retreads, and that's a lot of times why we see offenses like we saw last year, where teams aren't scoring points because everybody knows what's coming, and they've seen the same things over and over and over again. I think what Seattle did is, bring a different edge to this team, and offensively, it's how you counter that defense. We have a guy a defensive-minded guy. You want to make sure you have a great hire, and I think Ryan Grubb's going to be a fantastic move for them in Seattle.
Yeah, I do. That was honestly going to be my second one that I was going to say, Chris, was Ryan Grubb, just because it's finally, to your point, it's finally something different. But, it's hard for me as a 49ers fan to give Seattle any credit, so I kind of had to go with the Falcons.
I totally understand that. So let's move on real quickly. Let's get to the draft. What's something that maybe happened during the draft time that got you super excited or got, looking forward to and just came salivating over? We'll start off at the end.
Yeah, for me, it was Ladd McConkey. I went back and forth on this. Obviously love Marvin Harrison to the Arizona Cardinals, perfect for fantasy purposes in every sort of way. I love Rome Odunze for the long run with match up with Caleb Williams and even Malik Neighbors. I mean, if nothing else, I don't know who else besides him is getting the target share. So I did like all those things, but I wanted to go with somebody who wasn't one in the top three, but two really boomed his value with his landing spot. And that is Ladd McConkey. Now I've been on record. I do not like the Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh situation for Justin Herbert from a fantasy standpoint. I think from an NFL standpoint, it'll be great. It'll be fine, whatever. But from a fantasy standpoint, don't love it. Don't love the volume. However, because they had to get rid of Keenan Allen, because they had to get rid of Mike Williams, because we know Josh Palmer is just a dude, and we think Quentin Johnson might be a bust after year one because it looked pretty awful. Ladd McConkey easily comes in, I think in my mind, will prove to be the best receiver week one at training camp, and therefore have the biggest target share and be the go-to option. And there is room in his offense for the main pass catcher to be very good fantasy-wise. And then add in the fact that he's probably the best, or at least one of the best route runners coming out of the draft. And the fact that he blew everybody away with a surprising 4.3 940 to prove that, no, he's got speed to go with his route running on top of it. We saw Zay Flowers do well. We saw Marquise Brown do well. Greg Roman has had these rookie wide receivers come in when they can be the featured guys and perform. So he's not afraid to play them like an Andy Reid is, which is one of the reasons I worry about Xavier Worthy, at least for his rookie season, because he doesn't typically have his guys come out and play well. Rasheed Rice, even it took him till halfway through the season become a regular starter and as good as he was. So I love this for Ladd McConkey of the draft. I think he had the biggest boom to solidify himself as a top 4 receiver from this draft, and may even want it proven to be better than one of those big 3, depending upon how this shakes out.
I like it a lot. How about you, Adam?
Well, you guys know that I was a lot higher than consensus, definitely than you guys on Jermaine Burton. And I was so excited about the landing spot he ended up with, him going to Cincinnati, getting an early opportunity, as a rookie to be that third guy with T. Higgins, then potentially be able to take over that role and be that second receiver. I think that's the best opportunity for him, especially with, if he's going to be like a deep threat flanker type, to have someone like Jamar Chase, that's the X. Like, there's no we're going to have to put you out of position. Like, we're going to make you do things you're not good at. Like, no, you can go play your spot. Like, that's fine. That's open. You can do that. That's no big deal. I think it's a fantastic spot for him. I think it's a good fit for them. I like their draft in general, because all to them is another selection that I really, really like, another landing spot that I really, really like. So I think just Jermaine Burton's the big one, but the Bengals kind of getting my guys, I think was really cool. And I think, great job surrounding Joe Burrow with some weapons that I feel like are going to be pretty cheap.
Yeah, weapons are always important when you have a good quarterback. I think that's a nice, under radar move, maybe that people might have to remember from the draft, but Burton is definitely a sneaky good move. For myself, there's a lot of different things that happened during the draft, but I'm just going to kind of double down what I talked about before, Marquise Brown and Xavier Worthy to Kansas City. I mean, we were sitting there looking at this guy, like, where could he go? What situations could he wind up in? How will we use him? I think all of us kind of shared our viewpoint. We had our shows about the receivers, the rookie receivers in this upcoming class that we liked. What our concern was with some of them, and Xavier Worthy, our concern was, is he going to get kind of not utilized in the right system? Is it coaching going to kind of stick him in a situation where he's just running, goes and clearing out people? Well, just like I talked to Randy about Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Like I said, it's not MVS. It's not Kadarius Toney. It's not Denard Robinson from a couple of years ago. It's not Mecole Hardman. It's actual good receivers with Patrick Mahomes to throw the ball. We think he's good with the shit he's been playing with. Imagine having that and Travis Kelce. So excited, and thank you for that.
Shout out MVS to the Buffalo Bills, because we got to get super excited about that.
All right. That's going to be another one.
They found their Gabe Davis replacement, guys. They found their Gabe Davis replacement. Keon Coleman will be allowed to not have to only play the X wide receiver. And Adams, you talked about that before. Is that being one of your big gripes? The X receiver not necessarily performing as well in Joe Brady's offense. The flanker is usually the more productive guy. Well, Keon Coleman could actually be the flanker now with Marquez Valdes-Scantling there. So, it always benefits somebody. See, from a fantasy perspective, there's always a silver lining.